What would you do if, in the heat of an argument, the person you love most in the world suddenly turned to you and said, "You're not the father of your children"? Imagine the blood draining from your face, your heart pounding like a drum, and every memory you've built around your family flashing before your eyes, now tainted with doubt. That's the moment Prince Harry allegedly faced in a fight with Meghan Markle, and tonight, we're peeling back every layer of that explosive revelation. This isn't just gossip. This isn't just another royal drama headline. This is about a claim so deep, so personal, it strikes at the very foundation of family, identity, and legacy. And it all begins with 4 devastating words. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Picture the setting: Montecito, a sprawling estate, the golden California sun setting behind the hills, painting the sky in orange and purple hues. Inside, behind those manicured hedges and security gates, a fight erupts. Not just any fight, a fight that would allegedly tear down walls of trust, peel back layers of secrets, and unleash truths that even the palace never wanted the world to hear. The words Meghan is said to have spoken cut sharper than any knife. "You're not the father." Can you feel the weight of that? The sting? The humiliation? The disbelief? For Harry, this wasn't a stranger's insult. It wasn't a tabloid headline. It was the woman he left his entire royal life behind for. And suddenly, the ground beneath his feet began to crumble. But why now? Why here? Why, after years of silence, whispers, and carefully curated interviews, does this matter today? Because the world has been watching. From their royal exit to their Netflix deals, from Meghan's public battles to Harry's tell-all confessions, the Sussexes have become a lightning rod for controversy. Yet, through it all, one thing remained untouchable: the children. Archie, Harrison, and Lilibet Diana. They were supposed to be the anchor, the evidence of a love story that defied the palace, the monarchy, and the media. And if those children aren't truly his, everything changes. Titles, succession, reputation, legacy, and perhaps most importantly, Harry's very sense of self. Think about the irony for a moment. Harry, the boy who lost his mother in a tragedy that forever altered the monarchy. Harry, the soldier who went to war searching for purpose. Harry, the prince who walked away from Buckingham Palace, saying he wanted to protect his family at all costs. Now being told he may not even have a family to protect. The very man who once spoke of breaking generational trauma might have been trapped in a trauma of his own making. Doesn't that make you wonder? Was this a slip of the tongue in anger, or was it the truth finally clawing its way out? The beginning of this story grips us because it touches on something universal: betrayal. The fear of deception. The possibility that the people closest to us might not be who we thought they were. And when those fears strike in the context of royalty, where every lineage is scrutinized, every bloodline recorded, and every child potentially next in line for the throne, it becomes more than personal. It becomes historic. Let's rewind for a moment. When Archie was born in 2019, the world celebrated. It was a moment of unity, a chance to see Harry, the once rebellious prince, holding his newborn son with pride. But almost immediately, whispers began. Why were there no traditional hospital steps photos? Why was Meghan so elusive in her pregnancy appearances? Why did her baby bump seem to shift and change in size in unusual ways? The tabloids pounced. Blogs circulated theories. Even some royal insiders, off the record, raised their eyebrows. At the time, Harry dismissed it all as noise. Protecting Meghan, protecting his child, protecting his family. But could it be that the very rumors he swore to shield against were closer to reality than he ever imagined? And then Lilibet came, named after the Queen herself, a tribute to the grandmother Harry adored and the monarchy he had distanced himself from. Yet once again, the inconsistencies emerged. Where were the photos? Why was there so much secrecy around her christening? Why did it feel as though the palace was caught off guard by her arrival? Were these coincidences or carefully managed distractions? Tonight, those questions demand answers. And Meghan's alleged outburst may be the key that unlocks them all. Let's not forget the broader picture. In royal history, paternity isn't just a family matter. It's a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. Lineage determines inheritance, titles, and even who sits on the throne. If Archie and Lilibet's parentage is in doubt, what does that mean for the monarchy's future? For Harry's role? For Meghan's carefully crafted narrative as the outsider-turned-duchess who gave the crown its modern family? These aren't just personal stakes, they're global ones. And they remind us that when the royal family sneezes, the world catches a cold. Now, step back and ask yourself this. What drives someone to hurl such a devastating claim in the middle of a fight? Is it simply anger, the kind of reckless words people throw out when they want to wound? Or is it desperation, a slip revealing something hidden for years? We've all said things in arguments that we didn't mean, but we've also all heard the saying, in anger, truth comes out. Could Meghan's words be both, a dagger meant to hurt, but also a clue pointing toward a bigger truth? And if so, what else has been kept under wraps? The build-up here is undeniable. A prince in exile, a duchess under fire, two children at the heart of a storm, and a claim that could unravel everything. You can almost see Harry's face in that moment. Red with rage, eyes wide with shock, hands trembling with a cocktail of fury and despair. Maybe he shouted. Maybe he collapsed into silence. Maybe he asked the one question any parent would. Then who? That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It leaves you with more questions than answers. And once the door of doubt opens, it never fully closes again. We need to think about the timing, too. The Sussexes have faced mounting pressure. From canceled deals to tabloid exposés, their image has taken hits. Could this fight have been triggered by external stress? Could Meghan have lashed out under the weight of it all? Or, darker still, could the mounting pressure have forced a truth to surface that she could no longer contain? If that's the case, then this wasn't just a fight. It was a confession disguised as cruelty. Here's where it gets even more complicated. Harry's life has always been shadowed by questions of paternity himself. Remember the whispers about James Hewitt, the army officer many speculated could be his real father? Harry has spent decades rejecting that narrative, standing firm in his identity as Diana and Charles's son, to then face the possibility that his own children may not be his. It's like history mocking him, a generational echo of doubt. Can you see the cruel symmetry in that? It's almost as if fate itself has a twisted sense of irony. And yet, amid all of this, one thing becomes clear. This fight isn't just about Meghan and Harry. It's about the monarchy, about power, about truth in an institution built on secrecy and image. If the claim Meghan made is true, it could ripple through generations. If it's false, it still exposes a marriage so fractured that words once unthinkable are now being weaponized. Either way, the damage is immense. So here we are, at the cliff's edge of this introduction. A prince betrayed, a duchess accused of deception, two children caught in the middle. Meghan's words, "You're not the father," still hang in the air, heavy, haunting, impossible to ignore. Harry's face, his fury, his heartbreak, etched into the memory of that night. But the real story doesn't stop there. Because after those words left Meghan's lips, Harry didn't just stand frozen in shock. He reacted. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What does a man do when the foundation of his very identity is ripped from beneath him in a single sentence? Do you explode? Do you crumble? Do you demand answers? Or do you lose yourself in disbelief? Prince Harry, in that charged moment, did all of the above. His world spun out of control. The man who once fought the tabloids with fists clenched, the man who declared he'd walk through fire to protect Meghan and his children, suddenly found himself on the receiving end of the one accusation he could never have imagined. "You're not the father." Harry's reaction wasn't simple. It wasn't a straightforward burst of anger. It was a storm, a violent cocktail of rage, grief, and sheer panic. He reportedly went nuts, and not in a cartoonish, exaggerated way, but in a raw, human, terrifyingly real unraveling. His hands shook. His voice broke. He demanded to know what Meghan meant. Over and over, he pressed her. "What are you saying? Why would you say that? Is it true?" And each time she deflected, her silence louder than her words. Can you picture the silence between them? Thick, suffocating, like the oxygen in the room had been stolen. That's the moment Harry realized this wasn't just an argument. This was a revelation. He shouted. He swore. He smashed a glass against the counter, shards scattering like pieces of his own broken reality. His face flushed crimson, his veins bulged in his neck, his voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. Yet, within that fury, there was something else, fear. Fear that this wasn't just Meghan lashing out. Fear that those words carried truth. After all, haven't the rumors always followed them? Haven't the whispers always been there, from palace insiders to online forums? Suddenly, Harry was no longer laughing those whispers off. He was staring them dead in the face. And here's where the contradiction becomes unbearable. Harry had spent years standing as Meghan's shield. He took the blows, he fought the media, he distanced himself from his family, all to protect her and the children. He became a villain in the eyes of the British press, all because he said his love was worth it. But what if, in that very sacrifice, he was fighting for a lie? What if the children he adored weren't his to begin with? Do you see the irony? Do you see the cruelty? The man who wanted nothing more than to be a present father, unlike the cold, distant Charles he grew up with, might now be questioning whether he was even a father at all. Think of it. Harry pacing the room, running his hands through his hair, muttering under his breath, half to Meghan, half to himself. You're lying. Tell me you're lying. Say it. Say you didn't mean it. But Meghan just stared at him, her lips trembling, her eyes avoiding his. Was it guilt? Was it calculation? Or was it the exhaustion of carrying a secret for too long? The audience of their lives, us, the public, may never know the true tone of her silence. But Harry knew. He felt it in his gut. Now let's pause. Put yourself in Harry's shoes. Imagine everything you've given up for this woman. Your royal duties, your military honors, your home in the UK, your relationship with your brother, William, the final years with your grandmother, the Queen. All of it traded for love, for family, for the promise of peace. And now, that promise shatters. Could you forgive? Could you stay? Or would you rage against the deception until your voice gave out? Harry raged. He reportedly punched a wall, leaving his knuckles bloodied. He threw a chair across the room, the crash echoing through the Montecito mansion like a gunshot. He screamed at Meghan, demanding names, demanding explanations, demanding the truth. And here's the twist. Meghan didn't give him any. Instead, she turned the tables. She accused him of not being strong enough to handle the truth. She accused him of being just like his family, obsessed with image and bloodlines. Can you hear the sting in that? The woman he adored now calling him no better than the people he walked away from. This is where the emotional beats collide. Rage, love, fear, betrayal, and above all, confusion. Harry's heart told him to believe Meghan, to dismiss her words as anger. But his mind replayed every odd moment of their pregnancies, every rumor he had brushed off, every sideways glance from royal insiders who never fully accepted his children. Could it all have been pointing to this? And then, something even darker crept in. The ghost of Diana. Harry has lived his entire life under the shadow of his mother's tragic death and the rumors that surrounded her. Remember the whispers about James Hewitt? The cruel speculation that Harry wasn't Charles's son? He had been haunted by questions of his own paternity for decades. And now, in a moment of devastating symmetry, he faced those same questions about his own children. Do you see the twisted full circle here? It's almost poetic in its cruelty. But Harry wasn't just angry. He was devastated. At one point, he reportedly collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands, sobbing. Yes, the man once known as the tough soldier, the wild spare, broke down completely. He kept repeating one phrase, "They're my children. They're my children," as if saying it enough times could make it true, as if repeating the words would banish the doubts clawing at him. And Meghan? She watched. Some accounts suggest she tried to backpedal, saying she didn't mean it, that she said it in anger. Others insist she remained cold, refusing to retract the statement. Either way, the damage was done. Once words like that are spoken, they can never be unsaid. They hang in the air forever, haunting every glance, every touch, every memory. Here's where the contradictions deepen. Meghan has always presented herself as the victim, the outsider wronged by the palace machine. Harry has always been her defender, the man who validated her struggles. But in this fight, the roles shifted. Suddenly, Harry was the victim, and Meghan, whether intentionally or recklessly, became the aggressor. Doesn't that flip the entire narrative we've been sold? Doesn't that force us to re-examine everything we thought we knew about their marriage? And yet, the story doesn't stop at Harry's breakdown, because what came next was far more explosive. Harry's grief turned back into rage, but this time, it wasn't directed at Meghan alone. It was directed at the entire institution he had left behind. He shouted that this was what they had always wanted, to destroy him, to make him doubt himself, to strip him of everything. He accused Meghan of playing into their hands, of being no different than the royals she claimed to despise. In Harry's mind, this wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy. At that moment, something snapped inside him. He reportedly stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the chandeliers rattled. He wandered the grounds of their mansion in the dark, shirt torn, face streaked with tears, muttering to himself. Neighbors later said they heard shouting echoing across the property. Can you picture that? The once Prince of Britain, now pacing his California estate like a madman, screaming at ghosts no one else could see. But the real cliffhanger isn't Harry's breakdown. It isn't the shouting, the smashing, the sobbing. It's what happened when he walked back inside. Because Meghan wasn't done. She had more to say, and her next words would push Harry even closer to the edge. Words that no one, not even Harry, was prepared to hear. What do you do when the person you've given your whole life to starts dropping words that can shatter you like glass, one after another, without stopping? Harry had already been gutted by Meghan's first revelation. Those 4 devastating words, "You're not the father." But what came next? That was the moment the fight went from explosive to historic, the kind of fight that rewrites the story of a marriage forever. Harry had stormed back inside, his eyes red, his voice hoarse, his chest heaving like a man who had just run a marathon with the weight of the world strapped to his shoulders. He wanted an apology. He wanted Meghan to take it back, to say she didn't mean it. But instead, Meghan looked him square in the eyes and doubled down. She said, "You never noticed, did you? You never asked questions. You just believed what you were told." Pause here. Let that sink in. Imagine being told not only that your children might not be yours, but that you were a fool for never questioning it. That's not just betrayal, it's humiliation. Meghan's words hit Harry harder than any punch ever could. They weren't just an attack on his fatherhood. They were an attack on his intelligence, his instincts, his manhood. Harry staggered back, like someone had physically shoved him. His mind raced. What did she mean? What signs had he missed? He began replaying memories like a broken reel of film. Meghan's odd refusal of traditional hospital photos. The way her bump seemed to change in size depending on the angle of the camera. The secrecy around Lilibet's christening. It all suddenly flashed in front of him with chilling clarity. Could it all have been part of a plan? Could he really have been so blind? And here's the contradiction that makes this moment so compelling. Harry has always seen himself as the protector, the man who could spot threats a mile away, the soldier trained to survive under fire, the royal who understood the press machine better than anyone else. Yet here he was, blindsided in his own home, questioning whether the very children he tucked into bed each night were really his. Doesn't that twist your gut? The protector realizing he was the one unprotected all along. Meghan's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. She said, "Harry, you need to face reality." And those words were like daggers. Reality? For Harry, reality was already something he struggled with. From the trauma of Diana's death to the constant scrutiny of being the spare, his life had been defined by illusions and half-truths. And now, even his family, his supposed safe harbor, was being dragged into the storm of uncertainty. Harry shouted back. His voice cracked, but the fury in it was unmistakable. Reality? My reality is my children. Don't you dare tell me they're not mine. Don't you dare. His voice rose until it shook the walls. He demanded again and again, "Who's the father? Tell me the truth. Tell me right now." But Meghan didn't answer. Instead, she turned away. She walked to the window, arms crossed, her face half hidden in the reflection of the glass. Her silence was worse than an answer. It was a void, a bottomless pit where the truth should have been. And Harry, already unraveling, filled that silence with every nightmare scenario imaginable. Think about the psychological torment in that moment. When you're denied answers, your mind supplies its own. And for Harry, every possibility was darker than the last. Was it a donor? Was it someone she met before him? Was it someone she met during him? He had no clarity, no control, no compass. Just a storm raging inside his chest. And then Meghan spoke again. She said, "You wanted to escape your family. You wanted to start over. You got what you wanted, Harry. Why does blood matter now?" Can you hear the contradiction? For Meghan, family was about choice. For Harry, Family was about legacy. For Meghan, bloodlines were shackles. For Harry, they were identity. This wasn't just a fight about paternity. It was a clash of two worldviews. And it exposed, perhaps more clearly than ever, the fundamental fault line in their marriage. Harry's hands trembled as he pointed at her, his voice shaking but sharp. Don't twist this. Don't make this about me. This is about the truth. I have a right to know. But Meghan's calmness, cold, almost detached, was the cruelest twist of all. While Harry was unraveling, she seemed composed, controlled, almost rehearsed. Was this her weapon? Was this her strategy all along? To stay calm while he lost control, making him look like the unhinged one? Or was it something darker, the composure of someone who knew they'd just unleashed the truth and no longer needed to hide? Now, ask yourself this. If Meghan was lying, if she only said those words to hurt Harry in the moment, why didn't she take them back when he begged her to? Why let him spiral? Why let the wound deepen? Doesn't that suggest there was more to her words than anger? Doesn't that suggest there was, at the very least, a grain of truth in them? Harry's breakdown continued. He pounded his fists on the table. He shouted until his voice was hoarse. At one point, he even collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, whispering to himself like a man who had lost everything. My kids, my kids, my kids. Those words became a desperate mantra, as though repeating them could drown out the doubts. But the doubts were louder. The doubts were winning. Meghan finally turned back to face him. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but the words carried like thunder. Maybe it's time you stop asking questions you're not ready to hear the answers to. That line shattered what little composure Harry had left. He lunged toward her, not in violence, but in desperation. He grabbed her shoulders and pleaded, "Then tell me. For God's sake, Meghan, tell me. Are they mine or not?" And here's where the cliffhanger twists the knife. Meghan didn't answer with words. She looked at him, her eyes glistening, her lips parting as though she might speak, and then she stopped. She pulled away. She left the room. She left Harry kneeling there, broken, his question echoing into the empty space she'd left behind. What does that silence mean? Was it an admission? Was it fear? Was it manipulation? We may never know. But what we do know is this. Harry's demand for the truth didn't end that night. It ignited something far bigger. Because from that moment on, Harry wasn't just a husband fighting with his wife. He was a man on a mission to uncover the truth about his own children. And what he found next would stun even his harshest critics. Have you ever had a moment where silence spoke louder than any scream? Louder than any confession? That's where Harry was, kneeling on the floor of his own home, shattered, pleading for an answer, and receiving nothing but silence in return. Meghan walking out without saying a word was not just an act of defiance. It was an act of power, because sometimes silence is an answer in itself. And for Harry, that silence screamed betrayal. The room still echoed with the ghost of their fight. Shattered glass on the floor, the overturned chair, the scent of wine clinging to the air. Harry sat there, his head in his hands, staring at the space Meghan had just left. For a moment, he looked like a man who had lost a war. But then, something inside him shifted. He wasn't going to stay broken. He wasn't going to accept silence. Not this time. He decided, right then and there, that he needed to uncover the truth. The question that tormented him now was simple, but devastating. If he wasn't the father, who was? And this is where the contradictions ripped him apart. Because Harry loved those children. Archie and Lilibet were his heart, his reason for fighting, his shield against the darkness. Even if Meghan's words were true, even if biologically they weren't his, emotionally they were everything to him. Can you imagine that inner war? To love them more than life itself, while at the same time questioning if they were ever truly yours? That contradiction alone is enough to drive any man to madness. Harry began pacing. He tore through old photo albums. He looked at Archie's baby pictures, squinting at the eyes, the nose, the curls of his hair. Did he see himself there? Or did he see someone else? He compared photos of Archie with pictures of Meghan's past acquaintances, with images of men who had once orbited their world. Every resemblance, no matter how faint, became a dagger. And then came Lilibet, her smile, her dimples, the tilt of her head. Did she carry Diana's spirit? Or was that just wishful thinking? Now here's where things get darker. Harry started replaying Meghan's pregnancies in his mind. The first with Archie, the way she had held her bump in every public appearance. The viral clips of the bump slipping when she bent down. At the time, he brushed it off as tabloid cruelty. But in this moment, those images came back with a vengeance. Could they have been right all along? Did Meghan wear a prosthetic belly while someone else carried Archie? And if so, who was that someone? And with Lilibet, the secrecy was even greater. No official photos from the hospital. No footage of her arrival. A christening so private, even some royals were allegedly left out. Harry had once defended this as their right to privacy. But now, that privacy looked suspicious. Was it really about protecting the children, or was it about hiding the truth? Let's pause here and ask the question directly. How much do appearances matter? If Meghan was hiding a surrogate, if she was using secrecy to cover something up, was Harry complicit without even realizing it? Did love blind him so deeply that he ignored the obvious? And if that's the case, does that make him a victim or a fool? Harry's thoughts spiraled further. He recalled Meghan's closest confidants, the friends she kept from her Hollywood days, the whispers about wealthy men she had connections to before Harry entered the picture. Every rumor he'd once laughed off now felt like a possible lead. It's cruel, isn't it? How love can turn into suspicion so quickly. How the mind, once poisoned by doubt, becomes its own worst enemy. But here's where the emotional punch lands hardest. Harry didn't just feel betrayed by Meghan. He felt betrayed by himself, by his own judgment, by his blindness, by the fact that he, of all people, should have seen this coming. After all, he had grown up in a world of secrets, lies, and betrayals. He had witnessed how the royal machine covered up scandals to protect the crown. And yet, somehow, he hadn't recognized the possibility of a cover-up in his own marriage. That irony cut deeper than any tabloid headline ever could. The night dragged on. Hours passed. Meghan never came back into the room. Harry sat there, replaying everything, his eyes hollow, his heart shredded. And then came the most chilling realization of all. If Meghan was telling the truth, if Archie and Lilibet weren't his children, then the entire story of his life these past years was built on a lie. His marriage, his sacrifices, his very identity as a father, everything. And how do you recover from that? He couldn't sleep. He couldn't think straight. He wandered through the house like a ghost, staring at family portraits on the wall, each one now a question mark. At one point, he stopped in Archie's room. He stood over the sleeping boy, watching him breathe, listening to the soft rhythm of innocence. Tears streamed down his face. How could he love someone so much while doubting their very bloodline? That's the paradox of this moment. The deepest love colliding with the deepest doubt. And in that moment, he whispered something chilling under his breath. A phrase no one ever expected to hear from Prince Harry. He said, "Am I living my father's curse?" Think about that for a second. For decades, Harry was haunted by whispers that he wasn't Charles's son, that Diana's alleged affair with James Hewitt had made him illegitimate. He spent his whole life fighting those rumors, insisting he was his father's son, Diana's son, a true royal. And now, he was facing the same whispers about his own children. History repeating itself. The irony was brutal, almost poetic. Harry's fury reignited. He stormed into Meghan's study. He rifled through drawers, searching for anything, medical records, documents, anything that could prove or disprove her words. He found nothing concrete, just piles of papers, invoices, contracts. But the absence of evidence only fueled his suspicion. Why wasn't there proof? Why wasn't there something that settled this once and for all? By sunrise, Harry wasn't just broken. He was determined. Determined to find answers, no matter how painful. Determined to uncover the truth, even if it destroyed him. And that determination is what set the stage for the next chapter in this saga, the quest for proof. Because Harry wasn't about to let Meghan's silence be the final word. He wanted confirmation. He wanted evidence. He wanted the truth written in black and white, which meant only one thing, DNA. But here's the twist you didn't see coming. As Harry began plotting how to prove paternity, forces outside his home were already stirring. The palace, the press, insiders who had been whispering for years. And some of them claimed to already know the truth. The cliffhanger is this. Harry wasn't the only one questioning the children's paternity anymore. Powerful people in London were, too. And their next move would push this private fight into the public eye in a way that no one, especially Harry and Meghan, were prepared for. What happens when whispers that were once confined to palace corridors suddenly begin echoing across the world? When the rumors you tried so hard to bury, the secrets you hoped would never surface, are no longer just your private torment, but ammunition in the hands of those who want to see you fall. That's exactly where Harry found himself. The fight with Meghan had cracked something wide open. And just as he was gearing himself up to demand DNA proof in the privacy of his Montecito mansion, the storm reached all the way back to London. The palace had been watching. Don't think for a second that royal insiders hadn't caught wind of the chaos unfolding in California. They have ears everywhere, friends of friends, loyal staff, people who see more than they're ever supposed to. And when Meghan dropped those words, "You're not the father," someone close enough to the Sussexes whispered it straight into the corridors of Buckingham Palace. Can you imagine the shockwaves? Inside those gilded walls, lineage isn't just gossip. It's law. It's the very foundation of monarchy. Every child is a brick in the centuries-old wall of succession. And if Archie and Lilibet weren't truly Harry's, then cracks weren't just forming in a marriage. They were threatening the monarchy itself. Think about the timing. King Charles, already carrying the burden of modernizing a crumbling institution. William, poised as the heir, carefully cultivating his image as the stable family man. And then Harry, the runaway prince in America, embroiled in a scandal that could undermine the legitimacy of his children's royal bloodline. The irony was vicious. The one brother who stayed in the system was playing by the book, while the one who ran away might have dragged the monarchy into its greatest crisis since Diana. But here's where the contradiction deepens. For years, the palace had dismissed Meghan as a threat. Too loud, too independent, too unwilling to play the game. But in this scandal, it wasn't Meghan's independence that terrified them. It was her words. Because with one sentence, she didn't just shatter Harry. She gave fuel to everyone who ever doubted Archie and Lilibet's legitimacy. The press caught wind almost immediately. Tabloids in London and New York began running speculative pieces. Headlines like, "Is Harry really the father?" and "Royal lineage questioned again." Even late-night hosts in America started weaving jokes into their monologues, turning Harry's private nightmare into public ridicule. Can you imagine being Harry in that moment? Your marriage is collapsing, your children's identity is being questioned, and the whole world is laughing about it. Now let's step back and ask, was the palace behind this leak? Or did someone closer to Harry and Meghan spill the secret? Because scandals of this magnitude don't just spread on their own. They're planted, they're cultivated, they're weaponized. And if the palace wanted to tighten its grip on the monarchy, what better way than to quietly let Harry's crisis of paternity explode in the press? After all, it would distance Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession without Charles or William lifting a finger. Harry knew this. He wasn't stupid. He could see the fingerprints of the institution all over the sudden frenzy. And that only made him angrier. He stormed through the halls of his home, shouting that this was exactly what they'd always wanted. That Meghan's outburst had played straight into their hands. He felt trapped, betrayed by Meghan, hunted by the press, and undermined by the very family he'd once called his own. But here's where the emotional beat strikes hardest. Harry still clung to hope. Hope that Meghan had only said those words in anger. Hope that DNA would prove once and for all that Archie and Lilibet were his. He needed that proof, not just for the world, not just for the monarchy, but for himself. Because without it, the doubt would eat him alive. So he began plotting. Quietly, desperately. He started making calls. Discreet inquiries. Could he arrange a test without Meghan knowing? Could he swab the children's cheeks in secret? Could he use a friend he trusted, outside the royal machine, to process it? Every scenario he played through was risky. If Meghan found out, the fight would escalate into a war. If the press discovered it, the scandal would be irreparable. But in Harry's mind, there was no other choice. And then came the twist. Harry wasn't the only one considering DNA. Reports suggest that palace insiders had already started whispering about demanding their own proof. Think about the implications. If the monarchy itself ordered DNA testing, it wouldn't just be a family matter. It would be a constitutional one. The legitimacy of titles, the future of succession, the public perception of the crown. All of it would hinge on whether Archie and Lilibet carried Harry's blood. Do you see how dangerous this became? Harry wasn't just fighting for answers in his marriage anymore. He was fighting to protect his children from being dissected by an institution that saw them not as kids, but as symbols. And the cruelest irony? He was the one who once walked away to protect them from this very thing. Now, because of Meghan's words, he had dragged them right back into the fire. And the contradictions kept piling up. Harry wanted the truth, but he also feared the truth. Because what if the DNA confirmed Meghan's words? What if the world discovered he wasn't the father? Could he still look at Archie and Lilibet the same way? Could he still fight for them? Or would the monarchy erase them in the blink of an eye, rewriting them out of history as if they never existed? The palace, meanwhile, stayed silent publicly. But behind closed doors, plans were forming. Advisors whispered about contingency strategies. Lawyers discussed inheritance laws. Even William, according to insiders, began pressing Charles about what to do if. The coldness of it all was staggering. For them, it wasn't about Harry's heartbreak. It was about the institution. Protect the monarchy at all costs. Protect the crown. And if that meant sacrificing Harry and his children, so be it. Can you feel the tension here? Harry against Meghan. Harry against the palace. Harry against the press. And worst of all, Harry against himself. A man torn between love and suspicion, between fatherhood and doubt, between loyalty to his children and the possibility that they might not truly be his. And just when Harry thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Because while he was frantically trying to plan his own path toward the truth, someone else stepped forward. Someone who claimed to know what Meghan had really meant. Someone who swore they had been close enough to hear the truth years ago. Their revelation would send Harry spiraling even deeper, and it would bring this private family war onto the public stage in a way that no one, neither Harry, Meghan, nor the monarchy, could ever control again. What happens when a whisper becomes a shout, and the shout comes from someone who claims to have been there from the very beginning? For Harry, the nightmare was no longer confined to Meghan's lips or the palace's whispers. It now had a face, a person, a voice claiming to know the truth about Archie and Lilibet's births. And the scariest part? This voice didn't belong to a stranger or a tabloid hack. It belonged to someone close enough to Meghan to have seen things Harry himself might have missed. This alleged insider, a former acquaintance of Meghan's, emerged with claims that made Harry's blood run cold. They said Meghan had confided in them during her early pregnancy with Archie. They claimed Meghan hinted that the situation wasn't as simple as it looked. That there were arrangements in place. Do you hear the weight of those words? Arrangements. What kind of arrangements would a mother need when bringing a child into the world? Harry had spent sleepless nights tormenting himself with questions. Now, suddenly, someone else was saying out loud what he'd been too afraid to fully confront. That Archie's birth may not have been straightforward. That maybe, just maybe, another woman carried him. And if that was true, if Meghan had hidden such a truth not only from the world but from Harry, then what did that say about their marriage, their family, their entire life together? The emotional punch here is devastating. Harry didn't just feel betrayed. He felt stupid. A prince, born into one of the most scrutinized families on earth, reduced to a man blindsided in his own home. How had he not seen it? How had he not questioned it sooner? He thought back to the endless speculation about Meghan's bump, the strange angles, the inconsistencies. The palace aides who had whispered behind their hands. He had defended Meghan against all of it. He had silenced the doubts, insisting it was cruelty, racism, jealousy. But what if, in defending her, he had been defending a lie? And yet, here's the contradiction. Even as the insider's claims spread, Harry's heart fought back. He remembered the first time he held Archie. The way the baby's tiny fingers curled around his own. The tears that filled his eyes when he looked into that newborn face and thought, "This is my son." Can biology erase that? Can a revelation about bloodlines undo years of love? Or does love itself make fatherhood real, regardless of DNA? These are questions that cut deeper than any crown or title ever could. The press pounced on the insider's claims. Tabloids plastered headlines. Surrogate scandal? Archie's birth under question. TV panels debated the legitimacy of Meghan's pregnancies, with talking heads speculating as though it were sport. And Harry? He watched in horror as the private torment of his marriage became global entertainment. The same press he had once blamed for killing his mother was now feasting on his children. Can you imagine the rage boiling in his veins? But here's where the story takes a darker twist. The insider didn't stop at Archie. They claimed the secrecy surrounding Lilibet's christening wasn't just about privacy. They suggested it was about control, about making sure no one outside Meghan's circle saw the truth. That truth, they implied, was that Harry had been cut out of key parts of both births. Not physically absent, but emotionally sidelined, kept in the dark, treated less like a father and more like a prop in a carefully constructed narrative. For Harry, these claims were unbearable. Every word gnawed at him. He replayed Meghan's comment from their fight. "You never noticed, did you?" Suddenly, it all aligned. She hadn't just meant his blindness to rumors. She had meant his blindness to her choices, to arrangements he had never known existed. And yet, the contradictions kept him paralyzed. If he believed the insider, he was admitting his entire fatherhood was a lie. If he dismissed them, he was once again burying his head in the sand, just as Meghan accused him of. Either choice tore him apart. This is where Harry's desperation grew dangerous. He began reaching out to people he swore he would never contact again. Former staffers, old friends, even medical professionals who might have had access to records. He asked questions that no royal ever wanted on paper. Was there a surrogate? Was I deceived? Was I ever the father? His quest for truth wasn't just private anymore. It risked leaving a paper trail that the press could pounce on at any moment. And think about the irony. The man who fled Britain to protect his family's privacy was now digging into his own family's secrets, risking exposure far worse than anything the tabloids could have manufactured. In trying to uncover the truth, he was fueling the very machine he once vowed to escape. Now, let's ask the audience directly. If you were in Harry's position, what would you do? Would you demand DNA tests and risk proving the unthinkable? Or would you cling to love, telling yourself that fatherhood is about the bond, not the blood? There's no easy answer. And that's why Harry's torment resonates so deeply. It's not just a royal problem. It's a human one. But just as Harry was spiraling into paranoia, something else happened. Something he didn't expect. Another voice stepped into the chaos. This one wasn't from Meghan's world, but from within the palace itself. An insider closer to Charles, closer to William. They whispered that the monarchy had already prepared for this possibility, that contingency plans were in place, that Archie and Lilibet's positions in the line of succession could be quietly reviewed if necessary. Can you see the trap closing in? On one side, Meghan's silence and possible deception. On the other, the palace, ready to erase his children from royal history. Harry wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. He was fighting for their very existence in the eyes of the world. And that realization pushed him even further. He knew he couldn't stay silent. He knew he couldn't let others dictate the story. He had to take control. But how? By going public? By confronting Meghan head-on? By demanding DNA in front of the entire world? The cliffhanger is this. Harry was cornered, torn between exposing his family to the fire of truth or letting them be buried under the lies of silence. And the path he chose next would not only shock Meghan, it would shake the entire royal family to its core. What would you do if you were cornered? If both the person you trusted most and the family you fled from had you pinned, each one holding a knife over your head, waiting for you to move first? That's where Harry stood. On one side, Meghan, her silence cutting deeper than any admission. On the other, the palace, its lawyers sharpening their pens, its advisors whispering about succession reviews. Harry wasn't just trapped. He was suffocating. And in suffocation, people either collapse or they fight. Harry chose to fight, but not in the way the world expected. Instead of hiding, instead of letting Meghan's silence and the palace's whispers define the story, Harry began plotting his next move. He told himself one thing again and again. If the truth exists, I have to own it. I have to control it. Because if I don't, someone else will. And when someone else controls your truth, you're finished. But how could he possibly take control of a story this explosive? How could he demand proof without destroying what little remained of his marriage? How could he protect his children from being reduced to test results, while also silencing the storm in his own chest? That's the contradiction that tormented him. The very act of seeking truth could annihilate everything he loved. And yet, not seeking it would devour him from the inside out. Harry's first step was quiet. He reached out to a confidant, an old military friend, someone far removed from the palace and the Hollywood bubble. This friend had one quality Harry craved above all else: loyalty. Harry confided the unthinkable. He admitted Meghan had told him he wasn't the father. He admitted the palace was circling. He admitted he was considering DNA testing. The friend didn't laugh. He didn't judge. He simply asked, "Do you want the truth, or do you want peace?" That question haunted Harry, because truth and peace rarely live in the same room. And in that moment, Harry realized he might have to choose. Meanwhile, Meghan noticed the shift. Harry's eyes lingered longer on the children, his tone sharper, his silences heavier. He asked questions he'd never asked before. What hospital did we use again? Why don't we have certain photos? Why was the christening so private? Meghan deflected, sometimes with anger, sometimes with cold dismissal. And each time she refused to answer, Harry's suspicion grew. Can you imagine that tension? A house where every conversation is a battlefield, where every glance carries accusation, where even the laughter of children feels shadowed by doubt. And then the outside world closed in. The tabloids were relentless. Talk shows made jokes. Online forums dissected every photo of Archie and Lilibet, comparing facial features, speculating about secret surrogates, pointing out inconsistencies in Meghan's bump. Harry scrolled through them in the dark, torturing himself. He told himself he hated the press. Yet he couldn't look away. Isn't that the cruelest irony? The very machine he despised was now feeding him the questions he was too afraid to ask. At this point, Harry's paranoia peaked. He began documenting things in secret, locking away photos, taking hairbrushes, toothbrushes, strands of hair from the children, storing them as if preparing for some secret test. He didn't tell Meghan. He didn't tell anyone. But he carried the weight of those samples like contraband, terrified of discovery, desperate for answers. Now here's where the contradiction turns tragic. Harry loved those children with every fiber of his being. He kissed them goodnight. He told them stories. He played on the floor with them. And yet, in the same breath, he doubted them. Do you see the torment? To love fully while suspecting wholly. To hold your child in your arms and silently ask, "Are you mine?" That's not just pain. That's torture. But Harry wasn't the only one spiraling. Meghan saw his behavior changing, and she went on the offensive. She accused him of being paranoid, of sounding like the press he claimed to despise. She told him he was letting his family win by doubting her. She turned the narrative back on him, saying his obsession with bloodlines made him no different from the royals he abandoned. And that cut deep, because wasn't Harry's whole mission to be different? To break cycles? To build a new kind of family? The fights escalated. Shouting matches shook the walls of their Montecito mansion. Staff overheard fragments. Neighbors reported echoes of raised voices in the night. Harry's desperation collided with Meghan's defiance, creating a storm no one could contain. And then came the twist no one expected. Meghan didn't just defend herself, she threatened him. She said, "If you go down this road, Harry, you'll destroy yourself. You'll destroy us. And don't think for a second they won't use it against you." Who are they? The palace? The press? The public? Maybe all of them. But the implication was clear. Meghan was telling Harry that even if he found the truth, it wouldn't save him. It would annihilate him. Ask yourself, was that a warning out of love or a threat out of fear? Was Meghan trying to protect him from a truth too heavy to bear, or was she protecting herself from being exposed? The ambiguity is maddening, and that's what kept Harry trapped. But the trap was about to snap shut, because just as Meghan issued her warning, a call came through. Not from the palace, not from a journalist, from someone far more dangerous. A source claiming they had evidence, photos, documents, testimony, that could prove once and for all whether Archie and Lilibet were truly Harry's children. The catch? They wanted Harry to meet them face to face. Alone. No Meghan. No staff. No lawyers. And that's the cliffhanger. Would Harry risk everything to chase the truth? Or would he ignore the call and let the silence consume him? One path promised answers. The other promised peace. But neither promised survival. What would you do if the one thing you'd been searching for, proof, clarity, the answer to the question that's been haunting your soul, suddenly appeared in front of you, but came wrapped in danger? That was the choice Harry now faced. A mysterious caller. A promise of evidence. And one condition. He had to meet them face to face, alone. No Meghan. No protection. Just him, the truth, and the risk that came with it. For days, Harry wrestled with the decision. Every fiber of him screamed to go, to demand the evidence, to finally silence the whispers eating away at his sanity. But another part of him, The cautious soldier, the wary royal, knew it could be a trap. After all, how many people out there would love nothing more than to catch Harry in a compromising moment, to twist his pain into a headline, to profit off his desperation? The contradiction burned inside him. If he ignored the caller, he remained trapped in limbo, torn apart by doubt. If he went, he risked humiliation, blackmail, even danger. But in the end, Harry's obsession won. He needed answers. He needed to see for himself. So, one late night, under the cover of darkness, Harry slipped out of the Montecito mansion. No security detail. No Meghan. Just him in a hoodie and baseball cap, driving down the California highways like a man fleeing his own life. Can you picture it? A prince of Britain, reduced to sneaking out like a fugitive, chasing the ghosts of his own family's secrets. The meeting spot was strange. Not a luxury hotel. Not a hidden office. A parking garage, dimly lit, echoes bouncing off concrete walls, shadows stretching long and thin. It felt more like a scene from a spy thriller than the life of a royal. But maybe that was the point. Whoever this caller was, they wanted secrecy. They wanted drama. And they knew Harry was desperate enough to play along. Out of the shadows stepped a figure. Older, sharp-eyed, nervous, but determined. They introduced themselves not as a stranger, but as someone connected to Meghan's past. An acquaintance from her Hollywood days. Someone who claimed they had been close enough to hear whispers that Harry never did. And then came the bombshell. The figure pulled out a folder. Inside were documents, photos, timelines. Alleged evidence that Meghan had worked with a surrogate during Archie's pregnancy. That arrangements were made quietly, discreetly, with layers of secrecy to shield the truth. The figure pointed to discrepancies, hospital records that didn't align, gaps in Meghan's travel schedule, receipts that hinted at medical procedures never disclosed. Harry's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. His chest tightened. Was this the proof he had been craving, or a cruel fabrication designed to break him? The emotional punch hit him like a train. For years, he had defended Meghan against these very rumors. He had attacked the press for daring to suggest it. He had cut off family members who hinted at it. And now, in a dimly lit garage, he was staring at evidence that suggested he might have been wrong all along, that his loyalty had been misplaced, that his love had blinded him. But here's the contradiction that gutted him. Even as he stared at those papers, even as the doubts clawed at him, a voice inside still whispered, "It doesn't matter. These are your children. You've raised them. You've loved them. Biology doesn't erase that." And yet, the other voice, colder, harsher, snapped back. "If it doesn't matter, then why are you here? Why are you trembling with fear, desperate for proof?" The figure leaned closer, their voice low. "Harry, the palace knows. They've known for years. They just haven't decided when to use it." That line froze him. If it was true, if the palace had indeed been sitting on this knowledge, then everything made sense. The whispers, the cold stares, the constant sense that William and Charles looked down on him. Maybe it wasn't just about Meghan. Maybe it was about Archie and Lilibet. Maybe they had always known the children weren't truly his. Can you imagine the fury boiling in his chest? To think that his family, the same family that drove him away, might have been laughing behind closed doors at his expense. That they might have been waiting, biding their time, ready to drop the truth like a bomb when it suited them. But Harry wasn't just furious. He was broken. He clutched the folder like a lifeline, his knuckles white, his eyes wet with tears. He demanded more. Photos. Testimony. Anything concrete. The figure shook their head. "This is all I have. The rest, Meghan has hidden well." Harry stumbled back, his mind spinning. Was this enough to confront her? Enough to demand answers? Or was it just enough to tear him apart without giving him closure? That's the cruelty of half-truths. They destroy you without ever setting you free. And then, just as quickly as they had appeared, the figure vanished into the night, leaving Harry alone in the echoing garage, clutching a folder that might hold the key to everything, or nothing at all. Driving back to Montecito, Harry's mind raced. Should he confront Meghan immediately? Should he hide the evidence, bide his time, plan carefully? Or should he do the unthinkable and take it public before the palace could weaponize it against him? Ask yourself, what would you do? Would you protect your marriage and risk living with lies? Or would you risk blowing up your entire life for the sake of truth? By the time Harry pulled into his driveway, dawn was breaking. The house was silent. Meghan and the children were asleep. He stood there in the doorway, folder in hand, staring at the people he loved most, and wondering if everything he believed about them was a lie. And that's the cliffhanger. Because in that moment, Harry knew one thing for certain. The truth was no longer a distant shadow. It was in his hands. And whatever he did next would either save him or destroy him. What happens when the truth you've been begging for finally sits in your hands? But you're terrified to open it fully? That was Harry's reality as he stood in the doorway of his Montecito home, folder clutched tight, staring at the family he had once believed unshakable. Meghan sleeping upstairs. Archie's toys scattered across the floor. Lilibet's blanket draped over the arm of the couch. Innocent objects. Ordinary signs of family life. And yet, to Harry in that moment, every detail seemed tainted by doubt. He could almost hear Meghan's voice again, whispering those words. "You're not the father." The folder weighed heavy in his grip, not just with paper, but with possibility. Inside could be vindication, or annihilation, proof that Meghan had lied, or proof that the palace had been manipulating him all along. But here's the cruel irony. Harry didn't open it right away. He couldn't, because deep down, he feared what he might see. Think about that for a second. This is a man who once faced combat zones, who looked death in the eye, who walked away from the most powerful monarchy in the world. Yet in this moment, he was paralyzed by a few sheets of paper. Isn't it ironic how the battles inside a home can break us more than the wars outside? So he hid it. He slid the folder beneath a stack of books in his office, locked the door, and walked away. But walking away from paper doesn't mean walking away from truth. It lingered in his mind, gnawed at his chest, whispered in his ear even as he tried to play with Archie or tuck Lilibet into bed. And Meghan? She noticed. She saw the way Harry's eyes avoided hers. She saw the tension in his jaw, the silence that filled their conversations. Meghan was clever, sharp. She knew when something was off. And she pressed him. "What's going on, Harry? You're hiding something." He deflected. He told her he was stressed, that the press was getting to him, that the palace was plotting again. But Meghan didn't buy it. She pressed harder, and that only made Harry more defensive. Can you picture the tension? Two people under the same roof, circling each other like boxers in a ring, neither willing to throw the first punch, but both knowing it was inevitable. Now here's the contradiction. Harry wanted to protect Meghan even as he doubted her. He didn't want to accuse her without proof. He didn't want to put the folder in front of her until he had steeled himself for the fallout. But by hiding it, by lying about his behavior, he was feeding the very distrust that was tearing them apart. The days dragged on. Harry's paranoia deepened. He began studying the children more closely. Archie's laugh, Lilibet's expressions. Were those his traits? Or someone else's? He scrolled through old photos of Diana, of himself as a boy, of Charles, comparing features like a detective piecing together a crime scene. And the more he looked, the more confused he became. Some days he swore he saw himself in their faces. Other days he convinced himself he didn't. And then, late one night, he snapped. He pulled the folder back out. He sat at his desk, shaking, and opened it. Inside were copies of hospital records, timelines, receipts. Some things looked convincing. Some didn't. But one page stood out. A medical invoice tied to a clinic in Los Angeles. The date aligned with Meghan's supposed pregnancy with Archie, and the description of services, cryptic but telling, suggested fertility procedures. Harry's chest tightened. Was this the smoking gun? Or was it another red herring planted to torment him? The contradictions were maddening. For every piece of evidence that pointed to surrogacy, there was another that could be explained away. Nothing was absolute. Nothing was conclusive. And that was the most dangerous kind of truth, the kind that leaves you trapped in limbo, unable to fully believe but unable to dismiss. Harry's emotions swung wildly. One moment, fury. He slammed his fist on the desk, shouting into the empty room. How could she do this to me? The next moment, despair. He buried his face in his hands, whispering, "But what if it's not true? What if I'm destroying us for nothing?" And all the while, the world outside was closing in. The press had gotten louder. Tabloids published speculative timelines. Commentators asked blunt questions on TV. Why had Meghan's pregnancies always been shrouded in secrecy? Why were there so few official photos? The internet exploded with side-by-side comparisons. But here's where the story takes a darker twist. The insider didn't stop at Archie. They claimed the secrecy surrounding Lilibet's christening wasn't just about privacy. They suggested it was about control, about making sure no one outside Meghan's circle saw the truth. That truth, they implied, was that Harry had been cut out of key parts of both births. Not physically absent, but emotionally sidelined, kept in the dark, treated less like a father and more like a prop in a carefully constructed narrative. For Harry, these claims were unbearable. Every word gnawed at him. He replayed Meghan's comment from their fight. "You never noticed, did you?" Suddenly, it all aligned. She hadn't just meant his blindness to rumors. She had meant his blindness to her choices, to arrangements he had never known existed. And yet, the contradictions kept him paralyzed. If he believed the insider, he was admitting his entire fatherhood was a lie. If he dismissed them, he was once again burying his head in the sand, just as Meghan accused him of. Either choice tore him apart. This is where Harry's desperation grew dangerous. He began reaching out to people he swore he would never contact again. Former staffers, old friends, even medical professionals who might have had access to records. He asked questions that no royal ever wanted on paper. Was there a surrogate? Was I deceived? Was I ever the father? His quest for truth wasn't just private anymore. It risked leaving a paper trail that the press could pounce on at any moment. And think about the irony. The man who fled Britain to protect his family's privacy was now digging into his own family's secrets, risking exposure far worse than anything the tabloids could have manufactured. In trying to uncover the truth, he was fueling the very machine he once vowed to escape. Now, let's ask the audience directly. If you were in Harry's position, what would you do? Would you demand DNA tests and risk proving the unthinkable? Or would you cling to love, telling yourself that fatherhood is about the bond, not the blood? There's no easy answer. And that's why Harry's torment resonates so deeply. It's not just a royal problem. It's a human one. But just as Harry was spiraling into paranoia, something else happened. Something he didn't expect. Another voice stepped into the chaos. This one wasn't from Meghan's world, but from within the palace itself. An insider closer to Charles, closer to William. They whispered that the monarchy had already prepared for this possibility, that contingency plans were in place, that Archie and Lilibet's positions in the line of succession could be quietly reviewed if necessary. Can you see the trap closing in? On one side, Meghan's silence and possible deception. On the other, the palace, ready to erase his children from royal history. Harry wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. He was fighting for their very existence in the eyes of the world. And that realization pushed him even further. He knew he couldn't stay silent. He knew he couldn't let others dictate the story. He had to take control. But how? By going public? By confronting Meghan head-on? By demanding DNA in front of the entire world? The cliffhanger is this. Harry was cornered, torn between exposing his family to the fire of truth or letting them be buried under the lies of silence. And the path he chose next would not only shock Meghan, it would shake the entire royal family to its core. What would you do if you were cornered? If both the person you trusted most and the family you fled from had you pinned, each one holding a knife over your head, waiting for you to move first? That's where Harry stood. On one side, Meghan, her silence cutting deeper than any admission. On the other, the palace, its lawyers sharpening their pens, its advisors whispering about succession reviews. Harry wasn't just trapped. He was suffocating. And in suffocation, people either collapse or they fight. Harry chose to fight, but not in the way the world expected. Instead of hiding, instead of letting Meghan's silence and the palace's whispers define the story, Harry began plotting his next move. He told himself one thing again and again. If the truth exists, I have to own it. I have to control it. Because if I don't, someone else will. And when someone else controls your truth, you're finished. But how could he possibly take control of a story this explosive? How could he demand proof without destroying what little remained of his marriage? How could he protect his children from being reduced to test results, while also silencing the storm in his own chest? That's the contradiction that tormented him. The very act of seeking truth could annihilate everything he loved. And yet, not seeking it would devour him from the inside out. Harry's first step was quiet. He reached out to a confidant, an old military friend, someone far removed from the palace and the Hollywood bubble. This friend had one quality Harry craved above all else: loyalty. Harry confided the unthinkable. He admitted Meghan had told him he wasn't the father. He admitted the palace was circling. He admitted he was considering DNA testing. The friend didn't laugh. He didn't judge. He simply asked, "Do you want the truth, or do you want peace?" That question haunted Harry, because truth and peace rarely live in the same room. And in that moment, Harry realized he might have to choose. Meanwhile, Meghan noticed the shift. Harry's eyes lingered longer on the children, his tone sharper, his silences heavier. He asked questions he'd never asked before. What hospital did we use again? Why don't we have certain photos? Why was the christening so private? Meghan deflected, sometimes with anger, sometimes with cold dismissal. And each time she refused to answer, Harry's suspicion grew. Can you imagine that tension? A house where every conversation is a battlefield, where every glance carries accusation, where even the laughter of children feels shadowed by doubt. And then the outside world closed in. The tabloids were relentless. Talk shows made jokes. Online forums dissected every photo of Archie and Lilibet, comparing facial features, speculating about secret surrogates, pointing out inconsistencies in Meghan's bump. Harry scrolled through them in the dark, torturing himself. He told himself he hated the press, yet he couldn't look away. Isn't that the cruelest irony? The very machine